So yes, I'd like to tell you today a little bit about the origins of Cli-Fi and how the word was coined and where I think Cli-Fi is going in the future. I've received many questions from some students around the world via the internet, and I will try to answer them now. First question. Mr. Bloom, you said that you created the Cli-Fi to raise awareness about global warming and to give writers a platform to write their stories and their novels about climate change and global warming. Why did you choose the word Cli-Fi? Good question. There's a term called sci-fi for science fiction that's been around since about the 1920s, almost 100 years ago. And one day I was thinking about ways that climate change novels or climate change short stories or climate change movies could perhaps help to raise awareness among readers, among viewers, among political leaders, and among people in many countries around the world. And I was trying to find a word that might fit. And using the sound of sci-fi, it suddenly occurred to me in an informal way, maybe we could call this new genre of novels Cli-Fi, for climate fiction. CLI, Cli, and Fi for fiction. So I wrote a blog post and I started talking about Cli-Fi, and the response was pretty much zero. And this continued for a couple of years. But I never forgot the Cli-Fi term, and I never gave up on the concept. And in 2011, a friend of mine, Jim Lauder, in Tulsa, Oklahoma, was writing a novel about global warming in Alaska in the year 2075. And it was a kind of a climate fiction thriller. And I was asked to do the public relations and publicity for the book. And I wrote a couple of newspaper articles and some op-eds. And I began to call Jim's book, which is called Polar City Red, rather than just call it a political thriller or a climate thriller, which are good words, I decided to use the word in my press release. Jim Lauder is writing a Cli-Fi thriller titled Polar City Red. And it caught on. Other journalists began using the word Cli-Fi. The New York Times did a story about Cli-Fi. NPR did a story about Cli-Fi. The Guardian newspaper in England did a story about Cli-Fi. And suddenly, over the space of about 3 or 4 years, the Cli-Fi term has entered the media in over 20 countries, from Finland to Sweden to Norway to Germany to France to Italy to Brazil to Mexico to Spain, and of course in English to Canada and America and Australia and New Zealand and South Africa as well. So that's how Cli-Fi got its start, pretty much because of Jim Lauder's novel, which needed some publicity, and because the headline said, Jim Lauder has written a Cli-Fi novel, and it caught on.